Lord, yes, papi, hit me one time and make it funky.
I was brought up and told to have no fear. I was brought up and told to have no fear. I was brought up and told to have no fear.
Welcome to the Full Circle Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, David Roberts, along with the oral historian, Andre Taylor. Missing today is the OG, Dr. Neil Holmes. Today we have two special guests, not one, but two. The first mother and daughter author team that I know about. They've written two special books and they're here to talk about that. So welcome to the show, Miss Anna Gregory and her daughter, Randall Gregory. Ladies, welcome.
Thank you. Hello, thank you. Thank you for having me. So excited to be here.
Thank you for being here. Before we get into your publications, I think there are two things that are important to mention, important to our community. First of all, on the date of this recording, and it's going to air a little later, but on this actual date that we're sitting here, it's the birthday of Malcolm X. And I figured that was important to talk about, and something that we discussed briefly before we started recording. When I first entered college back in 1987, Malcolm X was kind of like a pop cultural icon. He was present in hip hop music. And then, he was just something, you saw him on t-shirts and, things of that nature. So I think it's great with the people that we have here. We have a couple of different generations. Anna and myself, we won't give our ages out. But then Dre, you're about, 10 years younger than us. And then we have Randall. So Anna, why don't we start with you? What is your opinion of Malcolm X as far as his legacy to our community?
When I think about Malcolm X, it takes me back to the 80s. And when you look at our culture and not having the power and being in a position, being marginalized, he represented, for me, what power can look like when it comes to being Black and standing up and having a voice. And even if you didn't agree with him, even if you didn't like his views, he stood for something and he stood for Black people. And so to me, the essence of excellence and what it means for our culture, it resonates with me, and he will always have a special place in my heart. So we can all talk history about he stood on this side or that side, but when you talk about someone who was willing to stand up and speak for Black people and go against the system, to me, I can't say anything else, but definitely always a special part in my life and in my heart.
And I would have to concur with that. And it's interesting. I remember reading his autobiography in the summer after my freshman year in college. And usually, for me, although I was a good student, once summer hit, I wasn't reading anything. I didn't want to do anything school related. I looked at this as, this was my free, fun time. But I got hooked on that Malcolm X biography and I just couldn't put it down. And I remember when the Spike Lee movie came out, it's kind of funny. You knew how it was going to end, but you wanted it to end differently, And now I'm into this show, The Godfather of Harlem, that has a Malcolm X character, someone playing Malcolm X. And again, you know how it's going to end, but you kind of hope that it will end differently. And obviously it's not. Dre, now you come about, a few years after us. What was Malcolm X's impact to your generation, if as much?
Well, for me, I went to Ben Franklin High School in Philly, and what a lot of people don't know is they fought to change the name to Malcolm X High School. It never happened, but there's a lot of paraphernalia that still exists in Franklin. Coach Kenny Hamilton was the driving force behind that, wanting to change the name of the school. When you sit back and you look at Malcolm, when you look at any of the people who were involved in what we would call civil rights movement here in the country, the first thing that comes to mind is the usage of the word radical. It has a negative light when you're talking about radical in the sense of the Black community. Think about Malcolm X, think about Move in Philadelphia. They were radicals, and the bombing of their home was last week on May 13th, sorry. And it's just that when you read what happened to him and the things that he stood for, how can that be a negative radical? When we think of the word radical, sometimes it's that negative part, but was Jesus not a radical too? So you have to put that into the question as well. Why do we see the word being drugged through the mud, for lack of better words, when it comes to the movement and uplifting of Black people? It's because the world does not really want you to focus on that aspect of the radical that is positive change. So for me, looking back at Malcolm X, I saw the movie, definitely did not hear him speak live. And like you, it's like, what happened and you hope things change, but it won't. And then, going to Franklin, Betty Shabazz, I think it's her great nephews, all went to Franklin with me. So we got a chance to be close to talk with them and hear about, the family movements and, what happened and how they're moving forward. And so it was always fun to hear those types of things up close and personal to people who knew them directly.
You said something very interesting. You talked about how you considered radical. And it's interesting, in recent years, it seems like as the years go on, Malcolm gets safer and safer. So now you hear people discussing him in schools, as when I was in school, he wasn't brought up. It was Martin Luther King, Jackie Robinson, Harriet Tubman. That was it. Every Black History Month, Martin Luther King, Harriet Tubman, Jackie Robinson, and that was it. So Randall, as someone who went to school, I guess much later than all of us, was Malcolm discussed at all when you were in school? And I'm talking high school. I'm sure when you were at Clark Atlanta, maybe he was discussed, but in high school, did they discuss Malcolm X at all?
It was very brief, whatever was discussed about Malcolm X. So it wasn't very extensive, but I also do think beyond school, I think we continue to kind of hear more about him. But I do agree, even with what Dre was saying, that we always associate him with radical. But I think more so in my generation that we don't necessarily see him as radical anymore, because people see my generation as very radical, like, oh my gosh, you guys are doing this and you're really speaking out and you're really not going against the standard of what you believe someone is to do. So I kind of like that notion of how he went from radical to like now more people see him as normal and really accepting like the things that he did and he stood for, and really speaking up for us, like, hey, we're trying to have this in our lives, we're trying to be successful and positive, and really just taking that power that we really were looking for.
And another thing I found out about Malcolm, and just because he's one of those people I can't get enough of, anytime if I see a documentary about him or a book about him, I try to digest it. I found out that he is really even more revered internationally, and I found that interesting. And not just African countries, in England, Europe, Asia, they really look at what he did. Like Anna said, they just admired his courage, So again, with his birthday, I think he would have been 79 today. I'm right. Okay, 79. So we just want to salute to him. And moving on from Malcolm, when we talk about people who always told the truth, Paul Mooney passed away today. Funny comedian. He worked with Richard Pryor. And I think what I liked about Paul Mooney, he always spoke from that Black perspective, no matter what his crowd was. I've seen him, in a crowd that wasn't receptive, but he just stuck with his guns and just talked about what he wanted to talk about. So we just want to salute Paul Mooney. But before we move on to the books, I just want to give anybody else an opportunity to speak on Paul Mooney if you had anybody had a comment. No,
I just wanted to add, for years, I didn't know Paul Mooney's name. Mm-hmm. I saw him in many things. I did not know his name. And I'm always the person like, I need to know who this person is. So once I found out who Paul Mooney, who he was by name, then I followed him and followed his work. And when I came home today, my husband said, did you hear about Paul Mooney? And so he showed me the information about what happened, very sad. And actually he was almost ageless, because honestly, I didn't realize that was the age of Paul Mooney. I think he was 79 or something was 79. And I'm like, oh my God, he looks like the picture. His skin was so beautiful, and I loved his sultry voice. And so he will definitely be missed.
And one thing I must say, I mixed up the ages. 79, you're correct. That's what Paul Mooney is Malcolm would have actually been 96. So when I was talking about Malcolm earlier, I guess I was thinking about the Paul Mooney article that I'm reading. I'm glad you brought that up. And just one last thing I just want to point out about Paul Mooney that a lot of people don't know. And Randall, this may be before your time, but if anybody's a fan like I am of that, I guess, cult classic film, The Fish That Saved Pittsburgh, wasn't a blockbuster, but it's a cult classic. You know, there were those twins that were on the basketball team. Those two twins were Paul Mooney's sons. And, you know, I didn't find that out until years later, because of course, when I saw The Fish That Saved Pittsburgh, like Anna said, I didn't even know Paul Mooney's name. I'd seen him on the Richard Pryor show or something like that, but I didn't make that connection until many years later. So salute to Malcolm X, salute to Paul Mooney. Now, salute to these two ladies that have graced us with their presence today. As I mentioned at the beginning of the show, you two are the first mother and daughter team that I know of to put out books, you know, simultaneously. So Anna, let's start with you. What's the name of your book and what was your purpose in writing it?
The name of my book is Lotus the Vice POTUS. And my book is inspired by the real life story of Kamala D. Harris. And so I was inspired by her ambition, her dedication. And so I thought about how can we capture this? And as a former social studies teacher and English teacher, I thought, how can we capture this for children and take this history and not water it down, but package it so beautifully that kids will want to read it over and over again, but create a character. So I took a fictional character to start, Lotus, based off of Kamala's name. And so Lotus is the young girl that's on the cover. So we start off with Lotus, but as she evolves, we hear Kamala's story. And so I was just inspired by this movement of a brown woman to become the first vice president of the United States of America, the first woman. And so I wanted kids to have this story. I wanted this history to be captured, just like we've read history, social studies, we've read all of these times in history, these moments in history. And so I wanted to capture this moment in history and I wanted to capture it for kids.
And I think that's important because I know when I was in elementary school, it was probably in first grade when I first saw the pictures of all the past presidents of the United States. And I was like, man, nobody's looking like me in there, you know, and I didn't think, regardless of what, you know, any of us may think of Obama's politics or what we may think of Kamala Harris's politics, and we can talk about that. But I did not think I would see the first Black president or first Black vice president in my lifetime. I didn't even think my children would see it. I thought it might be my great grandchildren, you know, and I'd be long gone. So I think it's great that you've captured this moment as an inspiration for young girls, you know, that they can take a look at this book and see what they can aspire to. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they're all going to become the vice president of the United States, but just understand that there are no limits. So I think it's real important. Now, let's switch to Randall. We're going to go back and forth between the two of you. Randall, what's the name of your book and what was your purpose in writing it?
So my book is called Chasing the Roots of My Heritage. It's right here. And it's an ode to HBCUs, and it's also a poetry memoir. So I really wanted to tell my story or really highlight what is the importance of HBCU, really what is it? And it's such an indescribable experience that not everyone gets to enjoy. So really trying to tell that story and put words to it so everyone can kind of get some type of experience or really understand like why do we love it so much or why is it so important? So that's what I really want to touch on, and really more so the historical facts of where an HBCU even comes from us being denied to even go into these institutions and not wanting to educate us or not wanting to teach us, and how we had to even go to a different school or these schools being founded just for us. So that's kind of my premise of really touching on HBCUs. And
you know, my co-host Dre is an HBCU grad as well, so I'm sure he's going to have some questions. But when you two were coming on, as I mentioned to you when we were discussing, you know, kind of off the air, I was so sorry that Dr. Neil Holmes couldn't be here today because He's the one that actually taught me the history of the HBCU. I had no idea, until I got to Akron and he told me about why HBCUs were founded. So for our viewers who may not know the unenlightened, for lack of a better term, why don't you give us a little brief history, of how the HBCUs were founded and their purpose?
Of course. So it really starts off with like when after the civil rights movement and everything, and a lot of people were considered like free slaves at the moment, that we were trying to get into schools that we couldn't get into, and the few people that did end up getting into the schools, no one wanted to teach them, or it wasn't a good experience for them, so they weren't treated well. And so these HBCUs were founded and of course they were founded by people that were in charge or could be in charge, and they were created for us to have another place to go. And so that's kind of how we started the HBCUs, and then kind of from there we kind of created our own sacred education beyond that point.
Now, I'm sorry, Dre, go ahead.
With HBCUs, and I mean, I'm a big supporter of one. I got two of mine. I got A&T and I have Cheney. So my question for you is, I hear a lot of people say that there's no purpose for them now. And what I find to be the response to that is, yes, there is a purpose for them. Because a lot of times now we're Black people navigating in white spaces still. And a lot of times when you're in those white spaces, the one thing that really gets you through is the connections you develop at a Black college. Be it through the social scene, athletics, fraternities, sororities, whatever the case may be, you have a network of people to help you navigate. What do you feel like the importance of Black colleges is today?
Okay. What would I say? I think I do completely agree with the networking, but I think when you go to HBCU, they build you up so much to be in this white world that we live in. So it's not like, oh, I just know how to be with Black people and then I don't know how to function. The thing about really instilling in us love and pride, and really showing you like your Blackness is literally glorious, and you can be proud, you can be successful. So I think just the whole aspect of attending HBCU really just teaches you more about yourself and who you can be in this world with anyone that you're with.
Now, switching gears, let me go back to Dre, did you have a follow-up question?
No, but I think Anna had something to add to it.
Oh, Anna, go ahead.
Thank you. I had a follow-up comment as a mom and as a reader of her book. And I can tell you, Dre, she has captured things. I went to PWI for my undergraduate degree and my master's degree. And so for me, being a parent who supported two children who went to HBCUs, this book is phenomenal. And that there's a piece in there, and I'll let Randall talk about it later, where it is two voices and one person going to a HBCU and one person going to a PWI. But the essence of Black college life, as me as a reader, it is just phenomenal. It just brings chills. It gives me goosebumps.
You know what was interesting, like you, Anna, as you know, I went to a PWI as well. And originally my thought process was like, well, I'm going to be working with all kind of people, so let me go to college with all kind of people. Mm-hmm. But when I got to that college, and this was 1987, maybe things have changed now, but when I got to that college, it was almost like going to a small HBCU within a traditional institution. There was no rapport at all, between the races at that time. And Dre, I know you had some experience at Temple University before you went to Cheney. I don't know if things were different, but when I was there, 87, I guess that was the Midwest, just no rapport. So for people that think, well, if I go to a HBCU, I'm only going to be dealing with certain types of people, you might be dealing with only certain types of people anyway. I mean, quite honestly, I'm just telling you the way it was then. Maybe it's different now, but this is what I saw. Now, Anna, let's talk to you. Let's start with you, or continue with you, I should say. How did this whole journey start, where the both of you decided to write books and put them out at the same time?
I'm so glad you asked this question. My daughter Randall came to me and she said, I am planning to write and publish a poetry book. She told me what it was about. And I have for years had this dream to write children's literature. And I have many books that I have journaled. They're not published. And so she said to me, this is what I'm going to do. And I'd like you to do it with me. So you can do it with me or you can watch me because I'm going to publish my book. And so I said, oh no, we're going to do this together. And so she was actually my inspiration. And she said, we can do this arm in arm. We can do it as women. We can do it as mom and daughter. And now we are doing it as sorority sisters. So I am so excited to be with my daughter, who is just, I mean, I look at her and I am in awe at the young woman that she is, but she was my inspiration. I had this dream that God gave me, this gift. And so it took him to speak through her to help me. And so she had her mind already set. She had her goals set. And so she brought me along.
And I gotta be honest, that wasn't the answer I was expecting. I was expecting it to be the other way around. You know, I was expecting you to say, I started, you know, writing a book and then I said, Randall, you know, join me in this, but it was the other way around. Okay. Mm-hmm. The young lion got it going.
I had to get it
yes,
together. I'm like, Mom, come on.
Well, Randall, what made you want to start this? Like, what inspired you to say, I want to write this book of poetry?
Well, I feel like I've always, like in my heart, I always wanted to write poetry. But the thing was, I study biology, I study science, I want to be a doctor. So it was like, can I do both? I don't feel like I can do both because, you know, society always tries to put us in these boxes like, oh, well, you're analytical, so you probably can't do poetry. And I really decided maybe last year, I was like, you know what? I'm going to go for it. I'm going to try poetry. I'm just going to start writing and see what happens. I kind of submitted to some things. You have to wait for like 8 months to hear back, a year. And I just said, I'm tired of that. I'm tired of waiting for somebody to validate me in the talent that I know that I have. And so I decided to, you know, I was like, I want to put out something different. And so then that's when I decided on what really inspired me. What do I really love? And it was the HBCUs or telling my story. And so I was like, you know, I'm going to commit to this and I'm going to publish a book. And then I made up my topic, but it was really just that whole scenario of just like, I'm going to do this and I want to do this.
That's great.
Now, my question, I have a question. I've never written a book before, but I had a career in journalism for 15 years where I was a writer and I covered crime and so forth in a lot of big cities. The writing process can be very daunting. It's not for the faint of heart. What kept you inspired to continue? This is for Randall and both of you. What kept you inspired to continue writing and not give up on the mission that you had to tell your story?
Should I go first? Okay. Well, for me, it was remembering what do I have in mind or the end goal of who this can impact. Because even 2 years ago when I was at Clark Atlanta and I used to go to church, and the pastor said one day, he said, what is the world missing due to your insecurity? And one of my insecurities was like this beautiful talent that I had, but I'm just like, I'm scared to be judged. I'm scared to put it out there. So I really just was like, you know, I really need to do this and just keep moving forward from there.
And for me, I would say I've always written, Dre, so I write a lot. And so I spoke to an author some years ago and we were chatting. And so I was telling her, I have this dream to be a writer. And I was telling her all the things that I had written. And she said, you know what? I'm going to say you like to journal. And she said, as long as you're writing for yourself, you're journaling. And so I just love, I really feel like words are magic. And it sounds cliche. And you as a journalist know, like when you can put words together, it's like a puzzle. Like certain words can just, I hear a sentence sometimes, it gives me chills because it sounds so beautiful. So it kept me going to write. That editing and revision. So, you have editing and you have revising. You have editing, you have revising. So you have the grammatical stuff, but then you have, how do you make it sound perfect? How do you make it more beautiful? And so that was challenging because we have a term in our house that Randall came up with. We call it Lulu Lotus. And so Lulu Lotus is continuing to change something that is already great. Like, don't Lulu Lotus it. And that's our term. Stop Lulu Lotusing. That means leave it alone. It's good. Don't keep changing it.
Right. Now, let me ask, I can't think of his name, but the actor that was good friends with Barack Obama, that wrote
Hill Harper.
Thank you. His name just escaped me for a minute. He wrote the book, Message to a Young Brother. And he said when he was putting that book out or putting it together, people that were, some were well-meaning, I imagine, were telling him, Black people don't read, saying you're wasting your time putting that out there. Did either of you get any of those negative messages when you were putting these books together or writing these books?
Randall?
I would say no, because we didn't really tell too many people. So I would say no. So no one really got a chance to tell us about that. So what me and my mom kind of did was kind of keep it kind of close in the family. We didn't want to really have it out there to anyone. We wanted to really focus and not kind of hear all the side convo of basically kind of what you're saying, like, oh, I don't know if people are going to read that. That's probably not a topic people want to hear, and really say, hey, this is my mission, this is my vision, and I really think I can make an impact in the world based on the story I want to tell. So we kind of didn't tell too many people. So we haven't really heard that, but I would be sure that some people probably think some of those thoughts.
I will say this. We kept it in the household. And so, but Eric Gregory, my husband, her dad, he was and is the biggest cheerleader for us. So if you want a believer that we can be the best writers and we're going to sell 1 million books, he is that person. So he kept us going and motivated. He had to listen over and over. He probably could read. He could probably recite a lot of the poems out of the book by heart. He probably could recite my whole children's book just by listening. But no, we kept it very small, very intimate. But one thing that we worked on and we decided, we were going to put out quality products no matter what. We were going to put out the best pieces of work, whether one person read it or 10,000 people read it. And that was our goal.
And that's a nice goal.
So working with your mom, and you say that you have another daughter that's in a Black college. What's it like getting like an education from a Black college student? Because I went to a PWI first, and then my last school was a PWI. I went to North Carolina State and got a master's in public history from there. It's a very clear difference between PWI, HBCU. What's it like, I guess, getting like a inside view from your daughter's perspective, and how did that help influence your book, Annie? Because you wrote about a topic of Kamala Harris, who went to an HBCU. So how did you end up? How did their experiences influence your writing, if it did at all?
Well, think about it as a journalist. When you think about the word vicarious, when you think about vicarious, that is it. I mean, just hearing. I mean, we went to Atlanta all the time. We went to DC all the time, and that was as parents. But just listening and watching someone speak about just a small experience. Oh, we did this, or we walked here, and radiate with that pride and joy beyond what we had already instilled. And so also in Lotus Device POTUS, I did include HBCUs for children. So I do mention like what's the purpose for HBCUs. And I also talk about how many still exist, so that kids, as they're reading, to know that she went to a school with a strong legacy. And also I mentioned that she joined a sorority. So I wanted the kids to really get a full circle, but it has been great. I'm a little jealous, Dre, just a little jealous, but that's okay. That's okay, because my coin paid for that schooling, but it is something to revere. And I am honored because if my child has experienced that, it's like I experienced it.
You know, and I want to make sure we close out by you all sharing with everybody, with our audience, how they can get your books. But before we do that, I want to discuss one last topic, and I want to hear from Dre and Randall. I get upset when I hear that, even though I didn't go to an HBCU and I don't know if my children are going to go to an HBCU or not. I get upset when I hear about HBCUs not being supported, you know, and when I heard about Morris Brown, think closing down and then reopening, you know. So Randall, we could start with you. What do we have to do as a community to support our HBCUs? Is it just about giving up money? What is it? What do we need to do?
Oh, it's so much. It's so much. Definitely, we need to support our HBCUs by giving them money. We need the athletes, the Black athletes, to go to these schools. We need them to be there because we need to be supported. Also, sending your kids to them, educating everyone about them. I think some of the problems is some people don't go to HBCUs because they don't know anything about an HBCU, or because their parents didn't go to one, that their parents are like, oh, well, we don't want you to go there, kind of situation. So we need so many different avenues of support. We need to talk about them. We have to continue talking about them. We have to continue giving money. We have to keep getting the students to go there. We need athletes. We need so much to all together, and just to keep working together and keep uplifting each other. We can uplift another HBCU. We have to keep uplifting the smaller HBCUs too, because some of the smaller HBCUs don't get any money. So the top, three HBCUs or four that everybody knows of, they get all the money. And then the other smaller HBCUs go to the wayside. And that's not okay either. So we just have to find different ways to support all of the schools, because we really need all of them. They all really are historic. They make a difference in so many people's lives. So we just have to find a way to keep pushing forward for them.
And you know what's interesting, and this was definitely before your time, really probably before my time as well, that at one time the best Black athletes did go to HBCUs, you know, but then when they got the opportunity, you know, to go to the LSUs and the Penn States, and I get it because those schools are on TV every week, and if they're trying to get to the NFL, you know, I get it. But when I look at, you know, 77% of the NFL being Black, I think 80% of the NBA being Black, but then none of those top athletes go to HBCUs, that bothers me, because I think if you have that skill and that talent, they're going to find you. You know, if LeBron went to Cheney, they would have found him, you know, but believe me.
Correct.
So Dre, same question for you.
So I was a scholarship athlete at a PWI. You know, I went to Temple University on a football scholarship. But now that I'm older and I have kids of my own, the one thing that I say that the greatest influence that we could have, and the influence that we can have and exposure for Black colleges, is introducing our families to them. My kids were born in Greensboro, so I think at the age of 2, I had both of them saying Aggie Pride, you know, A&T, their initials are A&T. So I don't know if that was by design or what, but when you look at a place like, let's say MIT, and you look at Georgia Tech, great schools known for engineering, but so is A&T. You know, so why not expose them to A&T? You know, oh, you might not get into MIT, you might not get into Georgia Tech, but this is equal, if not better in some instances. So I think that, you know, not only do we need the athletes, and I commend Jackson State for bringing a Deion Sanders to draw attention, and the young man who played basketball went to Howard, that was a 5-star recruit. You know, those are the types of exposure athletically that are going to help bolster the necessity for HBCU. But it also boils down to, when we look at people who've come out of these schools, you know, and see where they end up, you know, like you have a Ronald E. McNair, you know, who was an astronaut. You have, you know, heck, you have a John Chaney who was he went to Bethune-Cookman. Not many people knew that about him. You know, so you have these people that for years have come out of Black colleges. But again, it goes back to what you said early on. We learned about Jackie Robinson, Martin Luther King Jr. So it was never an onus put on more people, you know. And now, as a historian at a predominantly white institution, you know, when I see Black students walking around, I'm like, what are you doing? Oh, I'm going to grad school. Where are you going? Well, I'm going to law school. Which law school are you going to? Well, I'm going to look at one of the top ones. Do you know that Howard University has a law school? No, I didn't know that. Did you know North Carolina Central has a law school and they place more lawyers than anybody else? I didn't know that. So I'm recruiting on the grounds of a school that, you know, promote you to go to Harvard, go to Yale. But I'm a product of a Black college myself, so I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, go to that predominantly white institution. Nah, go ahead and take yourself on over here to a Black college, get that education, get that network, and build upon a legacy that's been established years before you were even thought about. You know, that's the best way I think that we can help our Black colleges, by funneling people into them. And I got, 13 more years before these two are heading off to either A&T. Well, if they can go wherever they want, but I'm going to be like over there, you know. So that's just what I'm going to do. And
like on the Cosby Show, how they promoted Hillman, a fictitious college, but Grandpa went to Hillman. You know, the parents went to Hillman, so they wanted Denise to go to Hillman. You know, so I think that's important, and I think it's great that Randall has written a book that's an ode to HBCUs, and Anna's book indirectly is an ode to HBCUs, because you're talking about the first Black vice president who also went to an HBCU, you know. So why don't we close out with Anna? You can start, tell us how our readers can get your book, because I'm going to get both books for my 11-year-old daughter, because I think these are both motivational.
Well, I would love to share. Lotus the Vice POTUS, you can order on Amazon. And so I have I'm working with some local bookstores. I do not have connections with them yet, but I'm working on some contracts with local. So right now, people can go on Amazon. You can get a sneak peek. You can go in, you can see the first couple pages and read, start to begin to read about Lotus. So Lotus the Vice POTUS, and it is by Nikki Gregory. So that is my pen name. So my pen name is Nikki Gregory. That is the one that my daughter helped me come up with. Like, I need a catchy kids author name. And so she helped me with Nikki, which is my nickname growing up. So Lotus the Vice POTUS on Amazon. And then if you have any local people, they can contact me. I have an Instagram, the real Nikki Gregory on Instagram. And so it's all about my book and Lotus the Vice POTUS, and they can contact me on my Instagram page if they're local. If they'd like to purchase a book. Other than that, on Amazon, and we're going to do some author visits, and we are super, super excited to do this together. So Lotus the Vice POTUS, grab a copy.
Okay, on Amazon. And Randall, how do we get your book?
Okay, so my book is also sold on Amazon. So it's Chasing the Roots of My Heritage. And I go by my full name. So my full name is Randall Simone Gregory, just for clarification purposes. And also anybody that's local can also buy through me. And my Instagram name is RSG_2poetry. So that's my poetry page. So if anybody wanted to contact me on there, they always can buy something from me. But otherwise on Amazon, you get your 2 days or a couple of days shipping and you're all good to go.
All right, well, I'll definitely be getting both books for my daughter. And as soon as the school year ends, I'll be bringing my daughter to Cleveland. So hopefully I can bring her to have both books signed by the author. That should be exciting.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Of course.
Ladies, I want to thank you both for being, on our podcast today. I think it's very important work that you're doing. These are great topics. And as this journey continues, I would love to have you come back and join us again.
Thank you for having us.
Thank
We're
you.
So excited.
Thank you for having us. It was a pleasure meeting you, Dre. I know Dave or David. I've known him for years, so I was excited to meet the other panelists or co-hosts. And so another Alpha brother, congratulations, and we're glad to have you.
And hopefully next time when you join us, we'll have the legend, the OG, Dr. Neil Holmes, for you to meet.
Yeah, we would love that. Tell him we missed him.
I would definitely send your regards.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care.
Lord, yes, papi. Hit me one time and make it funky.
I was brought up and told to have no fear.